So, you've probably heard that Bitcoin supply gets cut in half, but it's almost certainly not what you're picturing. It's this huge event, happens only every 4 years or so, and there's a ton of confusion around it. So, let's break it down. And yeah, you'll see jokes like this one from American HODL all over the place. It kind of plays on this idea that it's like a stock split, you know? It's pretty funny, and it perfectly nails just how confusing this whole thing can be for people. But yeah, spoiler alert, that is not how it works, not even close. And honestly, the real story is way more fascinating, and frankly, it's fundamental to what makes Bitcoin, well, Bitcoin. So before we dive into what the halving is, I think it's actually way more helpful to start with what it is not. Let's bust some myths.
Okay, this is probably the most important thing to get right off the bat. The amount of Bitcoin you personally hold does not change at all. If you have 1 Bitcoin in your wallet before the halving, guess what? You still have exactly 1 Bitcoin after. It's not a stock split, and no, the price doesn't magically get chopped in half. This event has zero direct effect on the coins that are already out there in people's wallets.
Okay, so if it doesn't touch the Bitcoin we already own, what's the big deal? What does it actually do? To get that, we've got to take one quick step back and look at how new Bitcoin gets created in the first place. It all comes down to mining and rewards. All right, so there's this thing called the block subsidy. Basically, it's a reward of brand new, freshly minted Bitcoin that's given to a miner every time they successfully add a new page of transactions, a block, to the official ledger, the blockchain. This is the main reason anyone bothers to run these powerful computers. It's the big prize for helping to secure the whole network. So, miners get paid in 2 ways. First, they collect tiny transaction fees from people like you and me when we send Bitcoin. But the real prize, the main event, is that block subsidy we just talked about. That's the reward of new Bitcoin. And the halving? The halving is all about that second part. It's the moment when that reward gets cut right in half.
You know what? Here's an analogy that makes it super easy to understand. Just think of Bitcoin mining as this giant global raffle that's happening 24/7 every 10 minutes.
So, here's how this raffle works. All these miners around the world are using their computers to solve these incredibly difficult math problems. It's like they're all guessing lottery numbers as fast as they can. And about every 10 minutes, one of them finds the winning number. That winner gets to add the next block of transactions to the blockchain. And they get the prize, the block subsidy. The halving is simply the pre-planned automatic event where the size of that prize gets sliced in half. Boom, just like that.
But why? Why on earth would you build a system that automatically cuts its own rewards? Well, this isn't some bug or a random event. It's actually one of the most important features of Bitcoin, baked right into the code from the very beginning by Satoshi Nakamoto.
And you can see the schedule right here. It is unbelievably predictable. When Bitcoin started in 2009, the reward was 50 Bitcoin. Then in 2012, bam, cut to 25. 2016, down to 12.5. 2020, down to 6.25, and in 2024, down to 3.125. It happens like clockwork every 210,000 blocks, which is about every 4 years. It's a predictable decline in the creation of new Bitcoin. And let's put that in real-world terms. Before the 2024 halving, the network was pumping out around 900 new Bitcoin every single day. The day after the halving, that number dropped to about 450. The rate of new supply, the inflation rate, if you will, gets literally cut in half overnight.
And his whole design, it gets to the very heart of what makes Bitcoin so different from traditional finance. The entire point was to build a system that takes flawed, fallible human beings out of the driver's seat of monetary policy.
Here's a good metaphor for it. Think of traditional money, like the dollar. Its policy is like a ship being steered by a small committee. They can speed up, slow down, change direction whenever they think it's a good idea. It's discretionary, and you never really know what they'll do next. Bitcoin's policy, on the other hand, is like a ship that was put on a fixed, automated course over a decade ago. That course is locked in. It's run by code, not a committee, and anyone in the world can look at the map and see exactly where it's headed.
Okay, so we have this totally predictable supply shock. The new supply gets cut in half, and everyone knows it's coming. So, what happens? What are the ripple effects of this in the real world?
Well, historically, this is where things have gotten pretty wild. I mean, it's basic supply and demand, right? If you suddenly reduce the flow of new supply for something, and demand for it either stays the same or goes up, the price should, in theory, rise. And if you look at the past,
After the halvings in 2012, 2016, and 2020, Bitcoin's price saw some absolutely massive bull runs in the months that followed. But, and this is the huge debate every 4 years, will history repeat itself? Everyone knows this is coming. It's the most predictable event in the entire space. So isn't it possible that the effect is already priced in? That the market is already accounted for the supply cut?
And that's a really interesting point. Some people argue that each halving is a smaller and smaller deal, relatively speaking. I mean, cutting the new supply by 450 Bitcoin a day is significant, sure. But when there are already over 19 million Bitcoin out there, it's not the same kind of shock it was back in 2012, when the cut was over 3,600 Bitcoin a day. The ripple is getting smaller as the pond gets bigger.
Okay, and what about this other big fear you hear about, the dreaded miner death spiral? The logic goes, if you slash the miner's main revenue stream in half overnight, won't a bunch of them just go out of business, turn off their machines, and cause the whole network to collapse?
It sounds plausible, right? But the answer is a pretty firm no. This is because Bitcoin has this absolutely brilliant, built-in immune system. It's called the difficulty adjustment. If a bunch of miners do shut down, the network automatically senses it. And after about 2 weeks, it makes those math problems in our raffle analogy easier to solve. This makes the remaining miners more profitable, which encourages them to stay and keeps the network chugging along perfectly. It's designed to self-heal.
All right, so let's zoom way out for a second. Let's look at the really long game here. Because the halving isn't just about what happens every 4 years. It's part of a much, much longer journey towards a totally different future for Bitcoin security.
See, this process of cutting the subsidy in half, it just keeps going, and going, and going. It'll get smaller and smaller until eventually, way out in the future, around the year 2140, the block subsidy will basically become zero. At that point, no new Bitcoin will ever be created again.
So what then? How do the miners get paid to secure the network? Well, the whole system is designed to slowly transition. It has to shift from being funded by these new coins to being funded entirely by those small transaction fees we talked about earlier.
And that, right there, is a big, open, multi-trillion-dollar question. As that block subsidy slowly fades away to nothing, will those transaction fees alone be enough of an incentive to keep this massive global network secure for generations? That's the grand experiment we're all watching unfold, and it leaves us with something to chew on long after the excitement of this one halving is over. So there you have it, a quick look at the Bitcoin halving. If you want to dive deeper, you can find the original sources we used for this analysis linked right in the description. And hey, if you enjoyed this explainer, it would be awesome if you'd follow, like, and share What Bitcoin Taught Me. We're on pretty much everything. Twitter/X, Nostra, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Spotify, and now right here on YouTube.